Delighted to welcome now Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spiked Online, who joins us. Good morning to you.
Hi, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. Great to have you back on the show. Now, look, there's so much I want to talk to you about, but I know as a keen Brexiteer like me, you'll want to come back on what Keir Starmer has had to say. But I wanted to reset our relations with the EU, particularly this press conference he's doing right now with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. He says it's time to turn a corner on Brexit. How much do you trust Keir Starmer not to undermine that democratic vote by 17.4 million of us?
Not very much, I have to say. You know, let's not forget that when he was shadow Brexit secretary, he tried to overthrow the vote. He tried to have a second referendum, which would have meant voiding the votes of 17.4 million people. So he tried to overthrow democracy. So I don't trust him very much. But I agree with something you just said, which is that if we could get a good trade deal with the EU that didn't interfere with our decision to leave that body, I'd be absolutely up for that. The more trade deals we can get as an independent nation, the better. But we have to keep a close eye and make sure that a trade deal doesn't become something a bit cozier and something that grates against what we voted for in 2016.
Yeah, indeed. And then that's kind of what we joined in the 1970s, and then it morphed into something completely different. Let's talk to you also just about, you know, the speech he made yesterday, tackling a lot of the big issues, the talk of tax raise, but this incredibly downbeat speech where, again, went back over the riots, and I wanted to talk to you about the prison situation as well, which you also touched on. We've got fewer than 100 spaces left in the male prison estate today, apparently, as we're releasing people willy-nilly, some of whom have committed very serious crimes, serving a fraction of their sentences. But it was the most incredibly downbeat speech about our economy, about the state of affairs, about division in society. It was sort of a pessimist charter, was it not?
You know, I just find this government so depressing. It's like they don't even make me angry. They just make me depressed. There's something about this government, not only the speech that Starmer gave yesterday, but the whole vibe of this government feels off. They just feel completely visionless, pessimistic, as you say, no sense of optimism, no sense of confidence in Britain and our capabilities, whether economically or socially or politically. It's like we're being run by a bunch of people who don't know what to do about the economic decline or about social decline or about any other problem afflicting this nation. And so they just project their own sense of despondency onto the rest of us. I find it's a very unusual government. You know, normally governments do something and you either really agree with it or you really oppose it. This government is just plodding along, being miserable, sucking the energy out of everything. I think people are going to lose faith in them very quickly.
I think they already have, to be honest. And as I always say, these speeches, you know, there are some people who can do a really good, really interesting, exciting and inspiring speech. And I've been to speeches by people who I profoundly disagree with politically, but felt, I thought, oh gosh, I can completely see why someone would vote for this, why someone would admire this person, even if I disagree with the tenet of what they're saying. But Keir Starmer I don't agree with what he says, and he's unbelievably uninspiring as a speaker. And you just think, we are in difficult times. We've got to sort out our economy. We've got to get growth. We've got to get productivity. We need to unite the nation. We need to move forward in this century. We need to, there's so much we need to do, especially with Middle East, Ukraine, possibility of what happens in Taiwan. We really need to come together as a nation and really get our act together. This isn't the man to do that.
Absolutely not. And, you know, it's important to be realistic, to have some realism about the problems facing the country. So I'm not opposed to a politician or a PM standing up and saying, look, guys, we've got some problems we need to tackle. That's absolutely fine. That's part of the job, in fact. But the way in which he does it, the dispiriting nature of how he speaks and what he says, and his lack of any solutions and any visions beyond a bit more authoritarianism and a few more tax rises, there's no bigger vision. There's no broader vision. And, you know, some people foolishly thought that this would be like 1997 all over again. You know, that big, and I didn't particularly like Tony Blair, but you could see why there was momentum behind him after all those grey Tory years. This isn't like that at all. This is things can only get worse, not things can only get better. And I think people are just going to switch off eventually.
I think they're already switching off. I mean, that's certainly the case. I mean, some of the things he's had to say recently, I know you've written a lot about this at Spiked, about the riots and the two-tier policing and the attitude towards the rioters. And again, you and I'm sure, are 100% in agreement that people who are violent, who make threats to people, who incite violence, convene outside a mosque, who set fire to things, so intimidate people, absolutely 100%. Throw the book at them, send those people to court and send those people to jail if they're convicted. But you and I have also been on the same side in terms of freedom of speech many, many times, and there is this real concern about the threat to freedom of speech. Doubling down, we're told today by the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, looking at those hate crime laws and particularly the non-crime hate incidents. How concerned are you that we are going to have some really fundamental rights taken from us, even more than they have been in recent years?
Really concerned. I think we have a government that not only doesn't understand free speech, but actively has contempt for it. And we saw that when they got rid of the Free Speech Act that was going to be brought in for universities, which were, they planned to get rid of that. That would have brought a bit more freedom of speech to campuses. They don't want to do that. And now we have Yvette Cooper thinking about bringing back non-crime hate incidents, which, just to remind your listeners, is an entirely Orwellian idea, where you would record, the police would actively record what people have said or done, even if it wasn't criminal. I don't think the police should be recording what people think or say unless they've committed a crime. So to bring that back would bring all sorts of opinion and arguments and colourful jokes or un-PC jokes, all that stuff that you see online every day could potentially become police matters. So this is a really tyrannical road that Labour is going down, and they seem absolutely hell-bent on stripping us of the fundamental right of freedom of speech, which, as you and I know, democracy doesn't work without that right, and that's what worries me right now.
Yeah, and look, we've just seen Mark Zuckerberg, of the chief executive of Meta, obviously Facebook and Snapchat and the like, and Instagram, actually admitting and claiming, I don't believe for a moment anything's about anything other than money for Mark Zuckerberg, but claiming to regret having given into a US government pressure to censor things like the Hunter Biden laptop story ahead of the 2020 presidential election, but also what things that you and I were fighting against, lockdown policy, COVID policy, mask mandates and things like that. And we know there was massive efforts to suppress our free speech. It happened here in the UK as well. It happened all over social media. Our YouTube page here at Talk was taken down by Google at one point for a day. Luckily, we were able to fight back. But again, claims of disinformation. You've got a government here that's saying they want to tackle disinformation, whether it's about people rioting or about any other issue, and tackle hate. But again, who decides what's disinformation and who decides what's hate?
Exactly right. Keir Starmer just 3 years ago said it is absolutely outrageous to say only women have a cervix. The idea that we should trust a man like that to decide what is true and what is false, what is information and what is misinformation, is a sick joke. I
have to, at this point, as I always do, I always check whether I'm one of those 0.1% of women or 0.01% who have a penis. Let me just have a quick look. No, still haven't got one. Still haven't got a penis.
Exactly. So you're not one of those mythical people that he completely made up. So, these people don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to truth or fiction or misinformation or anything else. They spread misinformation themselves. And also, when it comes to the idea of hate speech, there are lots of things that I don't agree with, but I accept people's right to hold those beliefs. So, for example, traditional Catholics think it's a sin for two men to have sex. Traditional Muslims think it's a sin for all sorts of worrying behavior that they don't like. This is called freedom of belief. And the more that those ideas are redefined as hateful ideas that should fall under the purview of government intervention, the more we're going to see free speech just completely evaporate.
Absolutely.
Living in a plural, free, mixed society means that you are going to encounter views you disagree with, and even views that you find offensive. That is a small price to pay for being a free person. And
you can challenge them as long as you do so in a respectful way. Exactly. Can I ask you just finally about this story that's been around, the Hamas 7 man, as he's known, a man wearing a Man United football shirt back in May walking down Oxford Street, full view of cameras, CCTV and the like. He's wearing a shirt which has Hamas on the back and the number 7, blatantly, openly glorifying the massacre of 1,200 people in Israel by Hamas on October the 7th. Police, 3 months on, have still failed to identify him, still failed to arrest him and charge him. Now, do you think that what he did, I mean, it definitely was a crime under the terror law. Do you think it should be a crime? Should the police arrest this man?
Well, you know, I'm a free speech fundamentalist, so I think even someone like this wearing such a disgusting shirt should be allowed to do it. But the fact of the matter is that under the law as it currently stands, Hamas is a proscribed organisation and expressing support for it is against the law. That's just the way the law currently stands, even if some of us think it should be changed. So the police should arrest him in this instance, and the fact that they haven't does speak to the two-tier policing that lots of people are worried about. You know, just imagine if someone walked down Oxford Street in a Ku Klux Klan outfit, right? This is what that's like. In fact, this is worse, because the Ku Klux Klan, thankfully, haven't killed anyone for a very long time. Hamas, which is an equally racist organisation, carried out the worst slaughter of Jewish people since the Holocaust less than a year ago. The fact that someone is walking down our streets celebrating that is beyond repulsive. The fact that the police haven't found him yet is even worse. And the fact that the left, the supposedly anti-racist, anti-fascist left, have said nothing about this man celebrating an act of fascism is such an indictment of them as well. That the double standards, it's not just two-tier policing, it's two-tier morality that we have in this country right now.
Well, hear to that. Brendan O'Neill, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Chief political writer at Spiked Online. Thank you very much indeed.